Best advice I ever got in security. Go.
Best advice I ever got was have empathy for your users. Make sure you have a better understanding of what it is that they are up against and ensure that you're actually helping them achieve their goals, not just putting a control on them and being the team that creates work for them.
It's time to begin the CISO Series podcast, recorded in front of a live audience in Los Angeles.
Welcome to the CISO Series podcast. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the CISO Series, and sitting to my immediate left is my guest co-host for this episode. It is the VP of Information Security for Big Five Sporting Goods. Please, warm round of applause for my guest co-host, John C. Underwood. And our sponsor for today's episode, allowing us to actually be here in front of you, this audience, and I'll explain that to the listening crowd in just a second. Our sponsor is Veza. Secure your identity access everywhere. Veza. More from Veza later in the show. Thank you so much for sponsoring us. We are live at the ISSA Los Angeles event in the beautiful Santa Monica. We're literally on the beach, John. Have you walked into the sand?
I have not. I'm looking at it right now.
Looking at the
I see the coast. I see the sun about to set.
There are people on the beach going into the water, and we're here inside recording a cybersecurity podcast.
We're having a better time.
We are definitely having a better time than them, for sure. That's good. And our audience agrees with us, don't you? Yes, of course you do. All right. Well, we've got a great show planned for you. I know you're going to like this. We did this last year. We had a lot of fun. We got to thank all the people at ISSA for making this possible. And this has been a great event of education. And we've been really appreciative of everything that they've given us during this time. All right. Now we have to welcome our guest as well. He is the head of security and IT over at Postman. Please, warm round of applause for our guest, Joshua Scott. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Why are CISOs leaving the profession?
So is it worth it to be a CISO anymore? I mean, based on our podcast name, I'm actually hoping so. But in a piece on ITSP magazine, Sean Martin asked this question, quote, is the role of a CISO with its inherent legal complexities and potential pitfalls worth the pressure? There is an increasing amount of liability tied up in the CISO role. I'm thinking of, obviously, the conviction of the CISO of Uber, Joe Sullivan. Now, does it seem that it's kind of out of balances with the responsibilities of the rest of the C-suite? I'll start with you, John. Do you think the negatives outweigh the positives or the other way around?
Ooh, it's really hard to answer that because it's kind of a global question, but the risk is at an individual level. So it's really something that each security leader needs to kind of evaluate for themselves.
Did you do this for yourself, I hope?
I'm in the middle of doing this for myself.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
I'm having conversations with my leadership where we're trying to get some protections in place. And I'm sure we'll get into that topic in a few moments here. But yeah, I think it's worth it. It's a very rewarding career. And I encourage anybody that is young in the industry, set your sights, go for it.
Did you question yourself about going into it for the fear of the legal implication, or because it's becoming more prevalent now? Maybe it's because you're dealing with it now. It's scaring you a little bit more now.
I think it's a concern. I'm involved with multiple industry groups, a lot of CISO work groups, things like that. And we are having conversations. I don't think I've been in a conversation for the past year that hasn't talked about the liabilities or the concerns that a CISO has as an executive in their organization.
All right, I'm throwing this one to you, Josh. First of all, I'm going to assume positives outweigh the negatives because you still have a job, or maybe you have a job that you're miserable with, and I'm sure you wouldn't admit that. But what's the negatives and positive debate that you're having?
I mean, for me, so I definitely think there are more positives to it, but there's considerable risk without a doubt. So what I've done is purposely gone to certain types of companies and certain types of environments and where I can kind of mitigate some of the risk by that, right? Just by where I work. Like I couldn't do any other job. For me, security has always been life. I've been doing this almost 30 years now. And mid-90s, I started doing security. So being a CISO is what I wanted to do.
So even if there's risk, you don't have a choice because you don't know how to do anything else.
I enjoy it. This is life. It's that too, yeah. I don't know how to do anything else.
I would say it's a calling. It takes a certain type, but Don't know how to do anything else. That works too.
That's so you
Don't want to do anything else. Let's just say that.
But do you think, here's the thing, like specifically, because everyone's like with the Joe Sullivan case, everyone's like, oh, this really changes everything. I heard that line a lot. Do you feel because of that case and the increased scrutiny and also the new laws that are coming about, that the risk you're facing is higher than, I'll say, 3 years ago?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What are the risks you feel you face now that you didn't face 3 years ago?
Well, if you're working for a public company and you're the head of security there, whether it's a functional CISO, deputy CISO, if you're the head of your given department or your company, there's some liability on you. You need to be having these conversations with your executive team and with your GCs about what kind of protections do I have? Am I on the cyber insurance? Am I on the D&O policy? What can you do to make sure that as I'm trying to protect you and make sure that we're stable as an organization, I'm not putting my home, my family at risk?
I mean, that's good right there. That's good feedback and good information. And I also make sure that my teams and everything that we're doing, we're very diligent about making sure that we don't run into those scenarios that we're blurring the lines between what's right and wrong and blurring the lines between whether we should have paid out a particular hacker or anything like that. So just ensuring that we're doing the right thing.
Well, one of the things that's concerning for me is you can do everything right and you can still have litigation action against you, civil action, criminal action. So yeah, there needs to be some level of protection there for the CISO. So any executives, board members listening to this, you might want to have those conversations with your security leaders.
The Great CISO Challenge.
Everyone appears to be on board with the cloud security automation. But why isn't everybody already doing it? So over on Read Write, Zach Amos wrote up some steps to help implement cloud security automation. So there's some typical items on it. Nothing that's going to come as a surprise to anyone here. Starting with risk assessments and expanding visibility into the cloud. It then goes into implementing generalized and case-specific automations, adding automated threat monitoring, and ending with evaluation and iteration. Now, this all sounds easy, but if it was, we'd all actually be doing it. So I'm going to start with you, Josh, on this. What in all these steps becomes the biggest challenge for the security team who is, dealing with trying to do cloud security automation?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, it's a great article if in a perfect world, right? But we're not in a perfect world. You're never going to have a full understanding of what the risks are. The business changes at such a rapid pace that being able to stay on top of that is going to be challenging, right? Then you've got to deal with multiple cloud platforms because if you're in a larger organization, you may have multiple cloud platforms, which adds to complexity. So it's nice to say that these are the 6 steps towards cloud security. If you're a one product, one service, one cloud environment, that might be possible. But the minute you get into multiple clouds, that's going to cause challenges.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of looking at the threat landscape, kind of like we're in this moment where we've kind of had this big bang. And so your threat landscape has gone, it's not only lateral, but it's going up and it's going down. So it's multidimensional. And so when you're looking at securing your endpoint, securing your network, securing your cloud, securing your other cloud, securing the other 2 clouds, the idea of slowing down the speed of business so that you can kind of get your arms wrapped around what you're trying to do becomes very difficult for an organization when you have multiple different initiatives and projects going on at the same time. It's a struggle all the way through every one of these steps.
Let's go into some specifics on cloud security automation, because when we say automation, there's a very wide breadth of that. So let's start what has been something easy you've been able to pull off that didn't take much heavy lifting? Either of you jump in. Or there is no answer to that.
Yeah, we both kind of lean back in our chairs, scratching our chin here. I think you can kind of review simple things like access controls. Sounds easy. It takes a little bit of time, but it's some of the simpler things that you can do that add a big bang to the security program.
Access controls, okay.
I think access controls is a good one, right? But that's easy when you have one account, one environment. The minute you get into, we've got many accounts within, just a single cloud provider, which makes it very complicated, right? So it's not easy to just do that. Now you got to talk about integrated SSO or, some kind of central authentication, which makes it a little bit more complicated.
So let me ask, with cloud security automation, do you have a CISO guru friend that has kind of nailed it? I mean, I don't know if this person even exists, but do you have a friend that you're in awe of, they're getting this every single time, and you kind of go to them for questions and advice, or does this person truly not even exist?
I think groups exist.
Groups. So
Groups,
you
yeah.
can literally piece together like a Frankenstein monster and get this information together.
Yeah, I mean, when you're young in your career, networking is something that you don't really think about. When you get older in your career, networking is not just for career advancement, but it's for solidifying the security program. And so gleaning that information from peers has been something I try to do with every group. But that one person, I don't think anybody has this figured out completely. I mean, it's easy to put it on paper. It looks great, but execution is difficult because we're all dealing with a different environment.
What about you, Josh?
They may have bits and pieces of it, right? But having the full picture of what cloud security automation would actually look like, yeah, I would actually go reach out to the various groups that I'm a part of as well and find out which sections they're doing well on, right? And then combine it all together. But
you haven't found one
But I
friend
haven't found one, no.
that's figured it all out. This is also what I feel about like AI in the marketplace. I was just talking about this with some other people, is that every session of AI is packed, and they're just hoping they're going to walk into the room with the person who has all the answers, and that person still doesn't exist.
I will say, if you're listening to this and you do exist, call me. I'd like to talk with you. I'd like to pick your brain.
Who's our sponsor this week?
Our sponsor is Vesa. Vesa, that's awesome. Let me tell you a little about them. So I don't know if you know this, that 75% of breaches happen because of bad permissions. We were actually just talking about that seconds ago. That cannot be detected, though, by traditional identity, governance, and administration, or IGA tools. So, for example, a traditional IGA tools fail to detect roles labeled as read-only that are, in fact, grant permissions to edit PIA data or users and admins created locally within a SaaS app, bypassing the IGA system altogether. This is all because traditional IGA tools cannot track granular permissions across enterprise data and applications. So this is where Vesa comes in. Vesa is the next generation IGA platform that manages individual permissions across all cloud, on-premise, and hybrid enterprise systems and applications. Vesa supports the full life cycle of identity management, from creation to monitoring to reviews, and offers over 100 integrations. I know this is what we all like to hear, with platforms like AWS, GitHub, Salesforce, SharePoint, and Snowflake. The Vesa Open Authorization API also makes it quick to connect to any cloud, on-premise, and hybrid system. So companies like Expedia, Intuit, and Blackstone use Vesa to streamline audit prep, entitlement certifications, and users access reviews, as well as to find and fix bad permissions, enforce security policies, and to continuously update every permission to maintain least privilege. Something we all like doing. So if you want to do this, you want to learn more about this, go check them out at Vesa.com. That's just spelled VEZA.com.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, it is time to play What's Worse. So for those of you who are not familiar with this game, this is a game of risk management. A lot of times we talk about security professionals not really being security professionals, but being risk management professionals. And this is really where this game plays very well. So we're going to play 2 rounds of this game. This first round, actually, this first scenario is actually 3 scenarios, and it's actually not a what's worse submission, but actually something that somebody posted publicly on LinkedIn that works perfectly as a what's worse game. So we're going to play it. And I have to give credit to Jay Dance of StubHub for pointing me to it, but the person who wrote it is Joe Hudson of TCM Security. So Joe is an unwitting participant in this game right now. All right, here we go. Scenario number 1. So this one actually has both positive and negative to it. So there's a rose and a thorn attached to each one of these. Scenario number 1. Your team is awesome. Your company treats you well and your pay is competitive, but your manager sucks and makes every day a challenge. All right? Scenario number 1. Scenario number 2. Your team is disconnected. Your company makes you feel like a face in the crowd. Your pay is competitive, but your manager friggin' rocks, is a true mentor and always has your back. Third scenario. You following these? So the first one is, I'm just going to repeat, great company treats you well, pay is competitive, the manager stinks. Second one, team is disconnected. You're essentially kind of competitive, but your manager's off the charts. The last one is your job is boring. Your team and manager are all replaceable, but your pay is 30% higher than anywhere else you can find right now. What's worse? John, you start here.
Obviously, the worst position there is the one that pays the most. Yeah. No.
You make sure the Big Five hears this.
Yeah. No, I think the one that's worse is with the team disconnected. There's nothing worse than trying to defend an organization when you're standing alone.
So that's the worst scenario. Okay.
To me.
Good. What do you think?
I think it's the third one.
The third one, the 30% pay where everything kind of stinks except the pay.
Yeah. Because if you're bored, you're not going to be engaged anyway. So it doesn't matter if you're making plenty of money, you're going to be bored at the job. You're going to leave anyways.
Yeah, so you're struggling through it. So
I would prefer the first
I'm
scenario.
hearing a lot of yeah from the audience. Okay, let's go through these again. I'm going to get audience response here. All right, scenario number one, to remind you, applaud if you, again, the one that you don't, it's the one that's the worst, not the one you like the most. All right, because that's the name of the game. We always have to explain this. And the other thing I'm going to explain to the audience before you do it is that we've played this and sometimes people raise their hand. And I always have to explain that you can't hear hands being raised on a podcast. All right. Trust me, it happens every single time. Although this is the first time I've explained it beforehand. All right. The first one is great team, but your manager sucks. By applause, how many people think that's the worst? All right, three people think that's the worst. All right. Four people. All right. Second one is your team's disconnected, manager's great. How many people think that's the worst? All right, good. A lot of people behind you on this one, John. All right, last one is 30% higher pay. That's a good third, almost there. But everything else stinks. How many people think that's the worst? I don't know.
Josh, I think you took this one.
Josh, you took it on that one. All right, okay. We got one more scenario. This comes from Dustin Sachs of World Connect Corporation. He, by the way, sends us in tons of what's worse scenarios. This one I love, all right? This one's really funny, and I'm really interested I really want you to work this one out in your head and how this actually would play out. What's worse, and these are both bad. What's worse, ignoring software updates for years, leaving your system vulnerable to known exploits, or, get ready for this one, clicking on every link in your spam email folder? Which one's worse? This one's a tough one.
I think the first one is worse. This is leaving all your software unpatched.
Unpatched.
Yeah.
I agree.
Because
Okay.
I think you can put in controls and other ways to minimize the risk of the second one.
Yeah, I don't see many RCEs coming through email. I mean,
That too. Yeah.
So do you think, could you actually survive either scenario? Like, could the first scenario, you don't think you could survive it?
I think there's lots of companies that are surviving that right now.
I've been to companies where we've been like that, yeah. So we survived.
All right. So you think you could survive? You think you could put enough controls in place that you could survive the spam email one?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, so walk me through. What are the controls you would put in place to survive the spam email one?
The one that comes to mind for me offhand right now is containerization. So if an email comes into your
So you create a sandbox, type thing.
Yeah. So the user doesn't even have to think about it. If it's an email from outside my domain, it opens up in an AWS instance, boom. It's captured there. If there's anything malicious, it explodes, doesn't ever hit my environment.
Good point. That's actually the simple. Same for you.
Mail gateways, solutions like what John mentioned.
Have you actually, either of you had to do anything like this? Like it got so bad you had to create like a way station, if you will?
No, nothing.
No?
I've never experienced anything like that. Not to that extent.
Not a way station, but we've implemented a tool like I just mentioned.
Let me bring this up. So we talked about this on a previous episode. I have a friend who works in human resources for a big company, and they actually had to fire a mechanic who kept failing phishing tests. Now, this guy was not a knowledge worker. He did not spend a lot of time on computers, but they let him go because he just couldn't stop clicking. Like, I guess it was an addiction. Who the heck knows what it was, but he could not stop clicking. And I've talked about this with all my guests. Everyone thought that was horrible. I thought it was horrible too. Could you shield someone like that? A mechanic, good person. They're not going to be spending much time on computers, although they probably have to check their own payroll and things like that. Like, could you protect an individual that's like a happy clicker?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to approach that. First, like, are you training this guy? Are you having conversations with him?
Well, obviously, but he failed it multiple times, and he had to take a lot of, retraining over and over again.
So, I kind of think that if you're depending on your users to keep your company safe, then we all do it to some degree. But if you're relying solely on your users to keep your company safe, you're kind of failing at your job as a security leader. So you need to have those controls that are invisible and underlying so that if they do fall, it's not going to hurt.
So what would you do to the mechanic who's the happy clicker?
So in that case, what we did, we just put containerization in for all email. And so anything.
And you can do it for one person, containerization for one person?
No, we're doing it for everybody.
Oh, okay.
Across the board. So if he clicks on something, it doesn't matter, it doesn't explode in our environment. However, for that situation, at some point, I kind of agree with HR. Like, I don't like it. I don't ever want to be involved in firing somebody. But if this person's just continuing to do that, they're a risk. We need to take care of that.
Josh, last word on this?
I would never fire anybody for anything like that. That's the last word.
What would you do if you were the CISO?
Is your CEO above security concerns? Like if a CEO asks you to let them make a serious security mistake, what can a CISO do? Now, there was a lively discussion over on the cybersecurity subreddit about, get ready for this, a CEO wanting admin rights to the network. I know that it's not settling well with anybody. All right. So it's not something I know anyone in this room would ever voluntarily do. But as one Redditor wrote, it's the CEO. And at the end of the day, they do what they want. And I'm sure you've had those, they're going to do what they want kind of moments. So everyone offered this advice, like, write up an email outlining why you strongly advise against this. With that, cover your butt email. Another Redditor commented, the CEO ordered me to implement it against my advice. So having a paper trail just definitely seems obvious, but you don't want to see the house of cards crumble. So we're going to get back into kind of the same discussion of like containerization. I'm going to start with you, Josh, on this one. If you had a CEO that said, give me admin rights, you have to do it. What protections do you put in place when your CEO gets those admin rights?
What protections do I put in place? So if there's a CISO at an organization, he should be pushing back on that CEO.
Of course.
Without a doubt, right?
Yeah.
But the CEO is like, I'm sorry, it's your job. Or
I would find a way to give him what he thinks he needs and not give him what he actually is
so like
asking
a
for.
Fisher-Price version of admin rights.
Exactly. But in reality, though, I would actually have a conversation with them and find out what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and let's find a way.
You could have it like read only and just edit it to say admin on it.
I'd create a new domain admins group or whatever it is that you're asking
and just
for,
give him his
and
own
that's what
little
he's
play
got.
space, if you will.
Yeah. He doesn't know. He doesn't need to know. And that's what I've found, right? They're not going to be that technical, so why not just appease them? If it's that bad of a scenario, right? If it's really that kind of, you need to do this and that's it. Now, typically, I would actually have the conversation with him and try to find out what he's trying to solve and what he actually needs, and then put in measures, whether it's being able to check out an admin credential or some kind of just-in-time access to get admin credentials for a period of time that's logged and monitored, and then it expires after like an hour or whatever.
What about you? What would you do in a scenario like this?
Well, I think the scenario we're talking about is a little bit different than what was described in that thread. So when I read through that thread, what they were talking about was the CEO wanted to download whatever they wanted to download. Mm-hmm. So I read that as local admin rights, even though that wasn't explicitly called out there in the.
Good point. I mean, I was just sort of playing this up, but yeah. I mean, it was just local. So yeah, having a good point. Having a conversation like, what is it you really want? Because having admin is a lot here. So. Well, they giving them rights to download what they want. Yes, you can do that.
Oh, you could.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it, but I mean, there's a couple of protections you can put. I mean, you can give them a thin client. Mm-hmm. So if something happens on that machine, you just zap it, spin it back up, and he's back up and running. If he doesn't want network administrative rights, that's a much smaller deal that you have to deal with. If it's just local admin rights, you can put protections on that machine. There's a bunch of different things you can do, but at the end of the day, I'm probably not writing an email to him saying, here's all the reasons why you're wrong, and I highly advise against it, because that's antagonistic. So I would have that conversation with him face to face.
And then if it still pushes it, the whole thing is some paper trail. Would you create one eventually?
Oh, I'd create a memo and put it in OneDrive in my little memos box, because then it's discoverable and it's not, I'm emailing you, and I don't want to be confrontational.
Right. Okay. Well, okay. Good point. Which is contrary to the advice from the Redditors. That's a really good point. Now, let me ask you, and obviously this never happened at your current jobs, but have you had, it doesn't have to be a CEO, but someone who essentially doesn't need additional rights asking for additional rights. Maybe because it's, oh, well, so-and-so got this. Can I have it? Have you had this, Josh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That happens
And
quite a bit.
Every day.
What are the kinds of things they're asking for?
Just they want admin rights because they want to be able to look at something or make some change. There's so many different cases, but ultimately it's just asking them, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you need? And then finding...
You'll often do it for them or...
Yeah. I mean, given that I also own IT, so yeah, I'll get the IT staff to actually take care of that change for them or do whatever it is that's necessary.
Yeah, a lot of times I find it's people trying to do their job in an application where they can't even see some of the configurations maybe, or some of the modules that they need to get into if they don't have a particular role. So they're trying to do their job, but they're bumping up against this wall. So then it just becomes a game of, okay, well, what do you need? Getting them in front of the right people that have those roles so they can kind of figure it out. Because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. And what I mean by that is they don't know what they need in that particular application. And then also they don't know what they're actually trying to accomplish. So there's a little bit of a game there that you need to play, a conversation you need to have. And it's never as straightforward as no.
Right, because you're really discovering. But they just ask for it thinking, oh, if I have this, I can do that. But they don't understand the implications of asking for admin rights.
Yeah. I mean, they want this control here to do this job, but they don't realize it comes with access to all of that over there. And that's additional risk that I don't want to provide.
Well, do you also tell them, they say, okay, I could do that for you, but you're going to be open to this, this, and this, and that. That's going to open to you a lot of risk. Are you sure you want that? Do you ever play that game with them?
Sometimes it depends. So if they're in a role where they actually need that and it's there's a legitimate business need for that, then yeah, we have that discussion. But sometimes, you just pull the compliance card. Like, yeah, sorry.
Oh, and so that's a variation of Department of No right there.
Sometimes.
I would love to give you admin rights, but unfortunately, our regulators wouldn't like it.
No, I don't play that card very often.
Yeah, I try not to play that card at all, actually. But yeah, but you do sometimes. There are scenarios where you need to. But I think ultimately it's about having that conversation, right? Trying to find out what is it that they're trying to solve, and then figuring out how you can actually. So it's saying, yes, but this is what we need to do. Yes, you can get that permission, but we need to, figure out a different way to actually give it to you without exposing a lot of extra risk.
And if there's a legitimate business need, let's do it. Let's figure out a way to get this done.
If you haven't made this mistake, you're not in security.
So over on our show, Cybersecurity Headlines, we reported on an incident where Microsoft leaked 38 terabytes of data on GitHub, all due to a misconfigured token. Now, for all the breaches caused by malicious actors out there, we also see plenty of self-infected security wounds. One Redditor on the cybersecurity subreddit said, the two worst incidents I ever worked on were triggered by one, an out-of-hours pen tester, and two, a batch job scheduled to run at the quietest time of night. So we don't actually talk about this much on the show. So how often are incidents due to this kind of friendly fire? John?
Well, one of those rings pretty close to home for me, or hits pretty close to home. We had a pen tester a few years ago. I'm not going to say which company I was with. But yeah, they did an after-hours pen test, and they did a brute force for all of our users. So we came in the next day, and about 90% of our users were locked out. That was a fun day.
A lot of phone calls.
That was a fun day.
And let me. So, how often have you? And can you tell a tale of a self-inflicted wound?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of the issues that occur are actually self-inflicted. They're accidental. They're mistakes that happen. It's only the ones that are actually malicious that end up making the news. But I think there's so many more that don't make the news that are all just simple mistakes, right? An oversight, an accident. We had a vendor of sorts that was actually doing some consulting on a particular assignment, and then they took GitHub items and then decided to publish it somewhere else where they shouldn't have. And when within there, we made the mistake of actually putting a key in there. This is many years back, and then all of a sudden this key is now public, right? Which is an AWS admin key. So you can kind of figure out what happens.
That's how the CEO can get the admin key,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So but it was friendly fire. It was us making a mistake or the vendor making a mistake. And I think there was nothing malicious behind it, but it led to malicious access into the environment.
But I'm sure with every case like this, where it is a friendly fire case, where you make your own mistake like this, it's always a learning experience, I got to assume. And
I would hope.
Hope so. So two things. One is, hopefully those kinds of incidents reduce. And second, the person who causes that, what's the fallout? Are they scolded? Do they beat themselves up? What happens after that happens?
I think this kind of goes back to what Josh was saying at the beginning of the show, where you need to have empathy. As a leader, You need to understand that your people take their job serious. They really want to be there. And when they do something that negatively affects the organization, they take it hard. So sometimes it just takes a kind word. It just, hey, I understand this happened. Let it roll off.
Mistakes happen.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, mistakes do happen.
May I ask, this could be an opportunity for the two of you right now. Have you made stupid mistakes yourselves?
Oh man, I cut out the VoIP system for the whole company one time when they were on live sales calls.
How'd you do that?
It was 15, 16 years ago, early in my career, a small company. And we had this system where whenever you created a change for like somebody's phone number, you hit commit or you hit send or something, and it basically had to take the whole system down while it did that and then brought it back up. And so ideally we should be doing that after hours. I didn't know. Nobody told me. Or maybe they did. I'm not saying. But anyways, I hit send and there we went.
You took everybody down.
It wasn't just but 30 seconds till the CEO and everybody down the line to my peers were standing next to my desk. And I'm looking up like, what the heck just happened?
Anything colossal stupid mistake?
Yeah, I mean, I bricked a core VPN router in when I was a network security guy between our data centers. So we basically lost all connectivity for like 12 hours. So that was rough, right? And we had to get RMA equipment sent out to us, which got there, the next morning by like 10 a.m. So we were making a change at like 10 p.m. the night before.
So did you beat yourself up or did somebody do the beating up for you?
No, I mean, I beat myself up. My boss was very understanding. He's like, hey, things happen. But I made sure that moving forward, I'm never making that change again. I'm giving it to somebody else.
Empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time for the audience question speed round.
All right, I have in my hand a whole slew of questions from you, the audience. So thank you very much for that. And I think we'll be able to get through these all because we got a little bit of time to finish this. So we're going to wrap up the show. Here we go. This is from Stephen Weil of Point B. And by the way, either one of you can answer this. Do you have a plan, or when do you think you'll have a plan for quantum computing?
No idea.
No
plan.
So no plan and no clue when you're going to have a plan.
Yeah.
All right. So there you go. Honest answer there. Has this ever come up? I'm actually going to be going to an event in Las Vegas where this is going to be a hot topic, actually.
Not for me.
You, anything?
Keep my mouth shut. I got nothing here.
You got nothing to say. All right. Quick, sorry, Stephen, you got nothing from that one. All right. Now, this comes from Lori Pelletier. Now that litigation is possible with California's new privacy law, CPRA, what, if anything, has changed in your organization? So, they can litigate for privacy violations. Has anything changed in your program? And when I say change, I think maybe more conversations with the legal staff. Who knows? What's changed?
Yeah, so nothing's really changed for us. We look at privacy as a legal issue. So legal owns it, and then I will help on the security IT side of the house to implement whatever they need. But that's about it. I mean, nothing's really changed. We're having these conversations. We're trying to keep a pulse on what's going out there with new privacy law. But I wouldn't say we're doing anything different at this point.
Josh?
Yeah, it's always been important to us, and nothing's really changed. We just continue with what we're doing.
But have you I would just assume you've cranked up conversations with legal.
We were already having quite a few conversations anyways, because we're really concerned about just making sure we do everything that's right with data security and data privacy.
And one of the things we're doing, just to add to that, it's not really changed, and not because it's a legal requirement, but we want to treat privacy as a chief concern for us. So what we've done is we've kind of, and this is a little bit of a practicality as well, but we're operating in multiple states. So what we've done is we've tried to bring privacy to the lowest common denominator. So we're basically treating all of the municipalities in the states that we're in with the same preference. So if somebody from another state calls us and says, hey, what information do you guys have about me? We'll treat them like they're California resident.
It's always lowest or highest common denominator.
Yeah, I don't know how you want to say it, but
highest common denominator in this case.
Yeah.
All right, this one comes from Michael Vinding, CISO over at AP Technology. And we're going to get into some questions about vendors. So what's one new way you're discovering vendor solutions that you did not do before? So I'm assuming you look out for new solutions when you need them. Do you have any new techniques or ways that you are discovering them that you didn't do before?
Peer groups. I mean, that's probably the place I find the most about new vendors is.
My guess is you've been doing that though for a while.
Yeah, true.
Are you going to new peer groups?
Yeah, I am going to new peer groups anywhere I have an opportunity to network and talk with other security professionals and other CISOs and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
and other vendors too. And tell me about your competition. Tell me about, who you're running across. And then also getting connected with some of the VCs and some, the YCs and the YLs and all that. That helps actually to see what they've got going. So
we have found that that's actually a popular place for CISOs. What about you?
I would say the same. I'm not really doing anything different. Most of my discovery comes through, reading blogs, reading industry articles, podcasts, peer groups, Slack channels. I'm really plugged into the community and my peers, and not so much reaching out to a vendor unless they're on my hit list or they're on my project list.
Similar to that question, this comes from Nancy Long from Guru Cool. What's one way a vendor has gotten your attention? And I'm going to say this in a positive way. I'm sure plenty have gotten to your attention in a negative way, but in a positive way, what's one way a vendor has gotten your attention?
It sounds a little bit like a platitude, but I would say be where we are. Today we're here at the ISSA in Los Angeles, and we have a bunch of vendors that are out here. I'm happy to sit and talk with them and figure out what they're doing, how they compare to my current vendors, and what are the gaps that they're filling that I may be looking to fill in the future. But that's just be where we are.
A great plug to sponsor ISSA LA next year. Yes, Richard? That's for you. All right.
I think what John said is great. I think, be where we are.
All right.
I could add a lot more there, but that's another time.
All right. This next one also comes from somebody at Guru Cool, from Pierre Jamay. And we actually had a similar question like this on a previous show, and I think this is a good one. If you were starting from scratch right now, how would you even begin looking for a SIM solution?
I wouldn't use SIM. I wouldn't look for anything SIM. That's the first thing I would do is actually get rid of that notion of that I need a SIM. And I would try to figure out what I'm trying to solve and then go look for that type of solution.
Okay, so I want to dig a level deep on that. Why do you think you don't need a SIM?
I think what SIM is now is not what we were promised 20 years ago. I think it's something that, it's probably one of the biggest budget items we have. And it's something that still really hasn't delivered the value we want, right? So there's a number of things, right? There's transforming the data, there's collecting the data. Each of those are separate problem spaces too, right? So, and long-term retention, data lakes, there's all these different conversations happening around what you need. And sometimes maybe you just need to search data, like what Splunk provides or something along those lines. So understanding what it is that you're trying to solve, and then go finding that tool that may solve it. Maybe eventually you get into a SIM, but maybe you really don't need one, because I think where SIMs are today, we don't have one. And we're not looking to buy one. We're looking to buy point solutions that solve other problems.
Well, I don't want to turn down all SIMs vendors out there, because there are a lot of people who still like SIMs. What's your take? How would you begin looking for a SIM solution, John?
Well, I was going to take the escape and say, hey, there's nothing left to say after that. But realistically, if it was me, I'm looking for a couple things. I'm looking for, does it fit my environment? Actually, more to the point, does it scale with the environment? So cloud becomes a very big deal to me. I would rather not have something on-prem if I can avoid that.
All right. Last few questions here. All right. This comes from Sammy Basu of Careful Security. What's one way you know you're being a good CISO versus a bad CISO?
Honestly, I think if people are kind of complaining that you're...
If there's no complaining, you're being a good CISO. Is that the idea? If everyone's quiet, or they're talking behind your back and you don't know?
Well, I was going to go down one path, and I realized, well, no, if they're complaining, then you might be saying no, and so maybe that didn't work. I don't know, Josh. You go ahead. I'll rethink
let your
my
board and your executive team feel that you're doing a good job. That's part of it. That you retain your team over multiple years.
Retaining team's a good sign. And I mean, do you ever get sort of feedback from the C-suite or the board?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that helps.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a contributor to it, but I think it's just one piece of the puzzle. Right? I think team health and the team dynamics, and not just your team, but your cross-functional teams as well.
All right, here we go. From Sarah Fornaldez of Champlain College, recent graduate over there. I like this question. What was your first thought when you became a CISO or a security leader? I now have this job. What are you thinking? What's going through your head?
I was I was the lone security engineer who was sort of like the manager, sort of like the director, sort of like the CISO.
You were a security team of one?
I was already a team of one, so it didn't feel, when I had a team formed around me, it didn't feel any different. Yeah. It's like, all right, I'm already doing all this stuff. Now I just have a manager title or a director title.
So it was kind of, you kind of sort of slowly fell into it. Yeah. It wasn't like a big coronation day or anything.
No.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know when I became a CISO. I actually don't have the title right now. I'm a VP of Information Security. I'm a functional CISO for my organization. But I've been the security leader at every organization I've been at. I was much less experienced early on, a little more experienced now. But I don't think I ever woke up one day and was like, oh, yeah, I'm a CISO now. I think it just kind of grew.
So a lot of people just sort of slowly roll into it, or it just sort of because this industry is so nascent. I hear a lot of these. I was a team of one, so it wasn't anything. Were you ever a team of one, a security team of one, John?
Oh yeah, I mean, I started off as a security team of one, and then we kind of built out an IT and a security group, and then I left that organization and became a director. And I guess the titles came along, but I've always been kind of sometimes not knowing what I'm doing, but the only one doing what I'm doing in my organization.
All right, last one from Haral Tsitsivas of Arlo Technologies. Do CISOs have an expiration date? Are you going to expire anytime, Josh?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it's 18 to 24 months like many say. I think it really depends on the industry you're in and depends on the CISO. But I spent 13 years at my last company, so I'm not expiring anytime soon. Not from work related stuff, at least.
Do you think you're going to expire anytime soon at a specific job, or just like as a career CISO? I mean, that's also, we're not talking specific companies, but as a career CISO.
I don't think the role's going anywhere anytime soon. I think it'll morph and change over time. But I talk with plenty of CISOs now we're in this position where the role is changing. I mean, obviously there's new regulations. There's the board is paying more attention to us now. Sometimes a company isn't paying as much attention to the CISO as the practitioner would like. But we're in this growth phase where it's developing into like a real executive, if you want to term it that way. But then I also have CISOs that I'm talking to, and they're looking for what happens life after CISO. So are you going to go the vCISO route? Are you going to be a consultant? Or are you going to be a board member?
That'd be a CISO expiration.
So there's an evolution. I don't know if it's...
So it's not. It's a CISO evolution.
It's an evolution.
All right. Well, that brings us to the very end of the show. Let's hear it from our audience. I want a huge thank you to our sponsor, Veza. Remember, Veza, secure your identity access everywhere. And remember, go to their site, Veza.com, to deal with all your identity issues. Very interesting stuff. I also want to thank my co-host here, John C. Underwood, who's the VP of Information Security over at Big 5 Sporting Goods, and also Joshua Scott, who's the head of security and IT over at Postman. The two of you have a last word on anything we said today. Also, if you're hiring, please let us know if you're hiring.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks for having me on. We will be hiring very soon, so stay tuned to the postman.com/career site.
All right. And
David, I just want to say it's my second time on your podcast. I'm already a co-host, so I think there's a good future here.
You're doing very well, yes.
Yeah, no, but thank you for having us. I really appreciate it. This was fun. ISSA, Richard, guys, thank you very much. And ladies, this was a wonderful day. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Big 5, unfortunately, we are not hiring right now, but I always have feelers out there looking for the next role, the next individual, so...
All right, and a huge thank you to ISSA LA, Richard Greenberg as well, for welcoming us back again for a second time. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience. We greatly appreciate you having us and listening and contributing to the CISO Series podcast.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.